Ladies and gentlemen, if we could make a start.
Recording's on.
Oh yes, I've got to wait for the recording because it's on. It's on. Well, the thousands across the county will now be tuned in to us all. It sounds very echoing in here and loud.
Yeah.
Keep your voice down, Councillor Payne, otherwise
Don't shout.
don't shout. Minutes of the last meeting held on the 28th of September. Those that were here, are we happy that they are a true record? Yeah, thank you. I'll sign those at the end. Item number 2 is change of membership. We've got to note the appointment of Councillor Nigel Turner to the committee in place of Councillor Bethan Eddy. So a warm welcome, Councillor Turner. You've obviously reached the pinnacle of your political career now that you've been appointed to this very, very important committee. So welcome. Yeah, and of course, one of the big personalities of the council you're able to sit next to. We'll move on then to apologies for absence. These are so complex, even I'm not going to get my head around them. So who's going to help me out?
I haven't received any apologies directly.
No apologies received directly. Well, it's up to members then to let us know. I know you're more or less a permanent feature, Councillor Creamer, but you're not really on this committee. So do you want to fill us in?
Yeah, apologies for Councillor Errol Henry. I'm Errol Henry today. Thank you.
You're Errol Henry today. Yes, you look the part. Anybody else? Councillor Perdue Horan, I don't think you're a full member of this committee, are you? But you pop up regularly.
Yes, I'm substituting for Eric Smith.
Right. Right.
No.
It's not gone through the official channels. Let's put it like that. It was mentioned en passant, but not officially.
Is it? Okay. Yeah.
Okay, fine. And Councillor Williamson is we not know where. We know not where. Okay, are you happy to accept all of those? Thank you. Declarations of interest, disclosable pecuniary and private interests. Any interest? No. In which case then, can we move to item number 5, which is the local government ombudsman's and local government social care ombudsman's decisions, August to October. And I shall go through them in the order that they are given in the yellow pages, starting at page 15. But before I do that, I suppose I had better move the recommendation, which is set out on page 9, so I move that.
Chairman, I second reserve my
Thank
right to speak.
you. So, this first decision upheld against as Mrs. J's complaint about the care and treatment provided to her husband by the council and the trust. Now, I believe a lot of the circumstances around this occurred during COVID, during the COVID lockdown. But is there anybody from the officer side that would like to say a few words before I throw it open? Yes, go on then, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this was a very regrettable case, and it's not an experience that we would want for people who have been discharged from hospital. And there were definitely practice issues across health and care. There was contextual issues. It was during COVID and winter, and the sort of second year of winter pressures. There was a lot of difficulties for the hospitals. There was a lot of pressure, and they were working to move people home as quickly as possible. New COVID guidance was put in place in 2020 that meant that all our social care staff had to move out of the hospital. So previously we'd been there working with health staff, and we'd be able to go and visit people on the ward and make our own assessment. Obviously that wasn't able to happen while we were able to have staff in hospital due to infection control. So we were very reliant on health info in terms of planning discharges, and in this situation the level of health issues were not picked up as part of the plan for return home. He also wished to return home. It's always complex when the partner of someone who wants to return home has a different view and doesn't want them to return home. But there was no carers assessment completed. So in those terms, we agreed with the faults. So what have we done about them? So individually, a development plan was put in place and performance plan for that worker, and that included input from our principal social worker about their practice. Staff moved back into the hospital, so they're based there again as soon as we were able to, for infection control, which gives us that key link that we're able to have with people. And we actually, as a system across health and care, we invited the local government association. This was prior to these findings, but I think they'll help address the issues. Hence, I'm just citing you on them now. So we had a local government association peer review around our discharge arrangements, because we put in temporary arrangements during COVID, and we needed to know what did we need to keep, what worked and what wasn't working. So we are in the middle of implementing those, and one of those was to put in place good transfer of care hubs. That was a multidisciplinary team, and that for every person that comes through requiring support with their discharge, a multidisciplinary team looks at that person and agrees what they need to get them home. So it's not just one agency looking at it. It's now in place in all the 3 acute hospitals across the county, and there's a programme of development supporting them with all the areas of improvement. So I'm happy to take questions.
Well, thank you for that. I think we have to accept that circumstances were particularly difficult at the time, and as has been said, we didn't have our staff in hospital. But it's important. Well, we hope we don't have to ever go back into that situation again. But I think it's important that you've looked at the discharge process, and you've certainly given me some reassurance. The one thing that hasn't been touched upon is on page 15, the complaint handling. The complaint handling by both the trust, well, we can't be responsible for the trust, but the council was inadequate. Now, I don't know whether that means the actual complaints procedure that we employed, or whether it was the complaint that went, it would about the actual discharge itself. Do you want to say something?
I think it was more what Sue was kind of saying, more the actual process of the discharge. The actual complaint was handled well in terms of timescales and setting expectations.
Thank you. Councillor Creamer.
Yeah, just a quick one. Accepting the circumstances at the time, and they were unusual, and only in place temporarily. Are we assured over that period, say 2 to 3 years when COVID was affected and we were affected, that this was the only incident? There's no hint of anything else slipping through the same way.
I don't know, but of course it was it wasn't over the whole of the COVID period. It was at the period where we hadn't got our staff in hospitals. I don't know whether you can comment on that.
Well, we did have Health Watch as well, who undertook some work with people who'd experienced hospital discharge, and there were clearly ways that it could be improved, but I have not been made aware through our complaints or other avenues of one where it was, where it had that negative impact on the person's health during that process.
Hey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, just following from Councillor Creamer's question, it would be, given what's been said by the Ombudsman, helpful to know whether there have been repeat incidents over the last 2 or 3 years similar to this, even if that can't be presented in committee today, to be given to the committee in writing to give reassurance. I'm also slightly worried that we've just heard on the record a response from our officer saying that the complaint was handled well. The report here from the Ombudsman very clearly says the complaint handling by both the Trust and the Council was inadequate. The responses did not address all of Mrs J's concerns and failed to identify that Mr J's discharge was fundamentally mismanaged. This is fault, the Ombudsman says. The complaint handling has caused frustration for Mrs J. And I think having a response that says, well, the complaint was handled well, but it was a discharge, is completely at odds with what the Ombudsman's saying to us here in black and white. And I think what I would want reassurance from, Mr Chairman, is that not only have we looked at the process of discharge, but that we've reviewed our process for complaints handling. Because what's being said crystal clear in black and white here is that the complaint was not handled adequately, and that the issues weren't taken up properly. So I think we need reassurance about the process as well as the discharge issues having been looked at, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, you may, and that's what we're here for. We're an effective. I hope we're an effective scrutiny body for the ombudsman's reports, and I hope I've made it clear to officers that where we are at fault, we hope that we're not going to be at fault, but where we are at fault early on in our complaints handling process, we need to hold up our hands and say, yes, we got it wrong. What can we do to put it right? Rather than get to the stage where a complainant feels that they've got to go to the ombudsman. And I think that's important. Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, thank you for your point. I do agree with that. However, this was a couple of years ago. Overall, procedures have been reviewed. There's been retraining done, and like Councillor Owen says, it is a unique situation with the COVID side of things. However, yes, take on board the comments about the complaint handling, but it was a unique time, and it has been reviewed.
Okay, I can see you're not entirely satisfied, Councillor Payne. I think we have to accept that these are historical cases going back 18 months approximately, and I hope going forward that we will see a reduction, and that we're just really picking up the backlog of what may have gone wrong in the past. Are there any other questions or comments on this particular case? No, thank you. Can we move on then to the next one, which is on page 31? The council was at fault when it failed to provide Mr. X with affordable options for his parents, Mr. and Mrs. P's care placements. Now, I do feel, and whilst I've said when we make a mistake, we need to hold up our hands, I do feel, quite frankly, that the Ombudsman has been overzealous with this one. If you are offered a care placement for a relative and you can't afford it, what do you say? I can't afford it. Give me some ones that I can. But that doesn't appear to have happened in this case initially. Now then, who officers, is there anything you want to add to this report? No? Members? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm right in thinking that this had already been heard, hadn't it, by the Ombudsman, and then it's almost as if he said, "Oh, by the way, there's another problem that we need to consider on this," and sure enough, the council has been well, the findings have been found, and the council has been at fault, and likewise, in fairness, the Ombudsman does refer to disagreeing with complaints in a couple of cases. But is it quite unusual for an Ombudsman to come back again on a case that has already had an outcome? Because it seems to me that they must be very, very busy with lots of complaints coming in. And is this just adding to inefficiencies and all the rest of it? And at the end of the day, has it really made that much difference? Thank you.
You're quite right, Councillor Butler. I think it was at our last meeting, we received the Ombudsman's final report on this case. Only it wasn't the Ombudsman's final report. We've now had a second final report. And I don't know whether we're going to get a third final report and a fourth final report. I think it's getting to the stage where we need an ombudsman to investigate the activities of the ombudsman, because this is not satisfactory. I can't answer your question, Councillor Butler. I don't know whether Marge Howard can say, with her vast experience of ombudsman's complaints, whether this is unusual or not.
She might have more than me. So I don't think it's routine, but it is interesting. And these ones that are in here today, we've got this case, and then there's another one where the Ombudsman has come back as well, albeit informally. So I wonder if it's a direction of travel. So I've spoke to Councillor and we discussed about maybe he was trying to have a meeting with the Ombudsman to just talk through how things are working and so we can all be clear.
Any questions on this one? Councillor Creamer.
Just testing. Try this. Try this one. Don't know where that feedback was coming from, Chair. Yeah, just a question. We said here there's been some improvements made. I just wondered what exactly those were. And I think the final, hopefully it'll be the final, because he does actually mention his investigations have concluded. So hopefully this really will be the final one, but it's cross fingers rather than anything else.
Well, I think you mentioned last time, as I've just been pointed out to me, that his investigations or her investigations have been concluded, but then they hadn't been concluded. I think we had a report last time as to what improvements had been made. Can you just very quickly encapsulate those for Councillor Creamer, since he's now a fairly regular attender at this committee?
Yes, Chair. So there was findings. It was about the fact that the care home had not communicated swiftly enough to the family that their relative who was in the home had had a fall, but they did communicate that, but it was felt not to be swift enough. So because the council funds that care home placement, we were found at fault because the care home did not let the family know soon enough. Clearly, that's quite having that level of oversight across all our many care homes. We work with over 400 different care homes. Is quite a level of oversight to have. Nonetheless, our quality and market management team do regular audits, and one of the things they look at is communication plans that the care home staff have in place with families. So we do send out regular reminders and guidance around that. And in this case, we didn't just remind the home, we resent all that guidance out in a regular news bulletin that we send out to the sector. And then the additional one was that we did not offer a care home place. It was again at a time of high impact of COVID in terms of staff sickness and absence across the health sector. We were seeing a lot of providers fail and hand back people, so care was scarce at that time, just by way of context, and has been raised. If anybody had raised that they wanted to look at the potential of moving their relative, we could have looked at that. So that's something that we'd always do. People generally don't want to move there; they generally want to settle and stay.
I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
What does concern me, and this is demonstrated with the next case as well, is that the county council seem to be being held responsible for everything that happens in every setting where the county council commissions commissions activities, and for every piece of paper that particular setting actually sends out. And I really don't see that is both fair or practicable. Anyway, is there anything else on this particular case, or are you? Yes, Councillor Lee.
Chairman, thank you. This is the second time I believe this happened. It happened in another case. Is there any chance we could have clarification going forward? Because like you, it seems that we don't know when we're in fault until we're in fault. It would be helpful if we could actually have some more advice on this information. So, example with the Nusra. How can we be? It's just really weird that we can be held, like you said, how we can be held for account in not doing something that we weren't expected to do. It's weird.
This is something that we would want to explore with the Ombudsman if a meeting can be arranged in the new year. And I think it's got to a stage where we do need to have that meeting because and I think, judging from other members, we are unhappy at the direction that the Ombudsman appears to be going in. So that will be taken on board at any meeting. Are there any other comments? Councillor Saddington.
Well, yes, Chairman. Moving on from what you've said about speaking to the Ombudsman, I think it's fairly relevant also to ask them, did they decide to come back and give another report? Or had the complainant made another complaint and said, or appealed it and said they weren't happy. What makes an ombudsman come back with another report? What is the reason?
We can certainly have that discussion, but my understanding is that when the ombudsman is going to produce a report, that the complainant has sight of the draft of that report that is going out to the council. So they would have had an opportunity to have commented, I think, at that point.
So my question is to ask the ombudsman what makes him come back with another report.
Well, we can certainly ask that question.
Mr. Chair, sorry, it's usually the complainant that would come back, but it is very rare, like Marge said, that we get a final report and another final report. Yeah.
Anything further on this one? We await further developments at our next meeting. Okay. Right. The next one, on page 43, Ms. X complained the council has not ensured her childcare provider, a nursery, issues clear and transparent notices. Well, I have to say, if I wasn't clear about an invoice, what I would do is actually get on to the person that issued it and said, "Hey, what's this about?" Is that being unreasonable? I don't think it is. And if you read the Ombudsman's report, Ms. X refused categorically to engage with that nursery. I'm just trying to, I haven't marked it up, but where are we? I just can't see. Thank you very much for that. Page 46. Yes, she said that she couldn't talk to the. I wasn't prepared to talk to the nursery. So you've got there a complainant who's got a complaint against a nursery. She refuses to talk to the nursery. We are held responsible in some way for that. Now, to my mind, that is grossly unfair. We've been told to pay, I think it's £300 plus in compensation. This is a parent who actually lives in the city, my understanding is, who's accessed childcare provision in the county, and the city has passed off its responsibility on to us. Now, this is just not on as far as I'm concerned, and I think it's quite wrong. But there we are. Is there anything, Irene, you wish to add to what's already been said in the report?
Yes, I think what's happened since we have now issued more guidance out to early years settings just to make it really clear that their invoices are clear, transparent, and information is broken down. The situation with this parent in particular, she had one child at the nursery and subsequently sent a second child to the nursery, and didn't want to engage with the nursery, which is where we really encouraged her to do so. She was taking her children to nursery most days, so that's where we wanted that to happen, and that's where we were seen at being at fault, that we should have gone in to mediate between the nursery and the parent. There are over 1,000 early years settings in Nottinghamshire. We do not provide early years ourselves, early years places. It's very much dependent on the sector, which is private, voluntary, and schools as well also provide childcare. So this was a private nursery. It's also important to say that the nursery has since changed hands, so it's under different ownership now.
And Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Irene, for that explanation. Just a point of detail. Reference is made about the council having to refund 50% of the additional charges, but there's no reference in the report at all about what that amount is in total. It'd be really helpful to know what that total was. And secondly, obviously, it's crystal clear, whatever our view may be here, Mr. Chairman, that we fell short of our statutory duties in terms of free place access and making sure that there are transparent invoices. I hear what you say, Irene, about updated guidance being issued, but there is reference in the report about a decision being taken by a relevant committee, full council, cabinet, or the appropriate committee to update our policies to make sure, wherever possible, this doesn't happen, or to mitigate this against this happening again. When can we expect that to happen? Has it already happened? And if it hasn't, which committee will it be going to, and in what time frame? Will it be coming to full council? Will it be going through cabinet? Will it be going through the appropriate committee, so that it's transparent that process has happened, as well as obviously the additional guidance that you've already issued?
Thank you. So in terms of the reimbursement, we thought it was called a refund before. So the money that we pay to an early years provider is for those funded places. We have then been asked to pay 50% back. Now at the moment we're still negotiating what that is. We've received the invoices from the nursery. We've received an Excel spreadsheet from the parent. They're not quite matching in terms of what we need to pay back, but we think it's about 1,500 that we need to pay the parent, but we are still negotiating that at the moment. In terms of the policies and so on, I think it's also important to say actually that we accept that we failed in terms of looking specifically at the invoice. But where we didn't, I don't feel that we failed, is the parent was still able to access a funded childcare. It's just the invoices weren't clear. So the guidance that we've got, we have a provider agreement, which is based on a national one. What we've done is actually, rather than amend that, we've created a sample. I've lost it now. So like an audit document to say this is how to lay out your invoices, this is how to break everything down. So it's just expanding the guidance that we've already got, the provider agreement. That provider agreement is a document where we can withdraw funding if somebody isn't fulfilling the duties. So at the moment we're not proposing it goes to any particular committee, that is just added to the provider agreement that we currently have. If people want us to take it somewhere, we certainly can do.
Thank you. That's really helpful, Chair. If I may, I just wonder how we satisfy the commitment we've made to the Ombudsman, because we've made a commitment in the decision column of the Ombudsman's decision about the report being transparent and going through a relevant committee. Does this committee satisfy that commitment to the Ombudsman? I don't know.
Well, I would have hoped so, because I think we've been pretty transparent this morning, and we've had a fair and reasonable discussion, and you've heard what action is being taken, and I hope you can understand the invoices that you've been sent and are able to work it all out. I know your points, Councillor Payne, but there is some onus on individuals to take some responsibility themselves, and I think this is a discussion that we need to have with the Ombudsman. Councillor Creamer.
Yeah, some of what you literally just said there on page 46, bullet point 18. The actual relationship has actually broken down with the nursery. So as an aside, do we have any policies, any procedures when that happens? Because presumably it does happen now and then. It may not lead to an ombudsman report, but do we have procedures when the communications or whatever breaks down between the parents and the nursery? So any set procedures we go through?
Thank you. I mean, it's very rare that it does happen. Most things can be resolved between the nursery and the parent or carer. Where they can't resolve a matter, they can come to us. The nursery or the parent can come to us to discuss the case. If it's an issue of quality, it's an Ofsted issue, so the parent would need to go to Ofsted. If it's something around payments, they can come to us for advice. There isn't a particular procedure. Maybe that's something we need to look at. I think if this keeps happening now, because I think the worry is that local authorities dispense their duties, give money out to the early years sector. If every parent had an issue and came to the local authority instead of that nursery, then local authorities, a lot of them, would find it very difficult to progress. So, if this becomes an issue, then we do need to have a mediation type policy or something. At the moment, this is the first case we've had like it, but other local authorities as well are very interested in what's happening in Nottinghamshire at the moment.
Yes, thank you. I agree with that. It's just that it would be or could be useful if there was a sort of step procedure. This has happened. Why? Not necessarily tick box, but where do we go from here? So, a staged process that both we could understand, the schools could understand, and the parents could understand. So, simple steps, and it gets more complicated, obviously, it passes through, but at least a start.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Creamer. I think if I'd reached that stage as a parent, I'd be taking my child elsewhere. But that's up to the individual. Councillor Lee, you indicated.
Chairman, the point was already made by yourself.
Thank you. Anything further on this particular case? Moving swiftly on then, Mr. X, here on page 55, Mr. X complained to that the council did not ensure he had adequate care support and left him in unsuitable accommodation. Again, I think we've bent over backwards to accommodate Mr. X, and it seems that the ombudsman has really only found against us because there was a time lag between us offering accommodation initially and him not accepting it, and then offering something else, and we couldn't actually note or turn to our notes of any telephone calls or correspondence that had taken place. And clearly, in that time, a lot of work was being done. It had just not been written down because they were too busy doing the work. And the irony of it is, I believe, and this can be confirmed or denied one way or the other, that Mr. X eventually took the first offer of accommodation that we'd made. And so we'd gone round in a full circle. He was offered accommodation, he didn't want it. We spent a lot of time and effort trying to find other accommodation, and then he was quite happy to accept the first accommodation. And we've been found at fault for doing that. Any observations from officers on this first before I throw it open?
Thank you,
Ainsley.
Councillor. You're quite right in terms of there was a lot of work went on in this case with Mr. X, and I guess the key issue was the difference between what we were able to offer and what Mr. X felt he ideally wanted. Yes, we did make an offer of what we felt to be appropriate accommodation, which was turned down. And the Ombudsman identified what appeared to be a lack of support or activity during a 4-month period and then over a longer duration. However, as Councillor Owen, you rightly say, actually the social worker was undertaking a significant amount of work in the background, but did not necessarily record every telephone call, every approach made to a housing provider or other non-key actions, and as such we couldn't evidence the totality of work that was actually undertaken. And ultimately Mr. X did move to the property that we identified in the first instance, and he's very happy there and happy with the support he's receiving. Following the Ombudsman's recommendations, we have reviewed our processes and we have implemented new guidance for staff to ensure that we have improved recording of actions and decision making, and we've got a new process in place to track progress in these types of cases, so that if this does occur again, we have a much better opportunity to share that work with the Ombudsman.
Thank you. Any comments from members? Councillor Payne.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to Ainsley as well for the explanation about one of the remedy actions. Have we made any changes in relation to more regular updates to service users, Ainsley? I know you said we've made improvements in terms of tracking and monitoring, which obviously is agreed as one of the remedy actions, but have we made any changes in relation to more regular updates to service users?
Yeah, so one of the things that we now have in place is a progress tracker for all accommodation cases, which is distilled down into stages. So there's very clear stages of progress, and part of that isn't just recording what we do, but also giving an update to the person concerned so that they know what we've done, what timelines we're working with, and what progress has been made on their case.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Can we then move to the last one for today? On page 61, Miss X complained about delays in the assessment process for her daughter Y's education, health and care plan. I think we've held up our hands to say there was a delay. We didn't produce the plan within the statutory time frame, which we've admitted to, and it will be up to the department and the relevant cabinet member to ensure that that doesn't happen again. But I don't believe necessarily that wise education was necessarily hampered by that failure. But perhaps officers could enlighten us a little further.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. I'm Karen Human, Group Manager within Education, Learning and Inclusion, and you have me here today because my colleague Jill Norman's on annual leave, but I will endeavour to answer any questions that you have in relation to this. And yet the local authority had admitted that there were delays in the EHC process outside of statutory timelines, and apologised for that. The Ombudsman talks very much about our responsibilities under the Section 19 of the 1996 Education Act around the local authority having responsibilities where children or young people are unable to access a full-time or suitable education. And this young person wasn't in receipt of a full-time education at this time. She was at an Academy Trust school who had correctly notified the local authority through our termly data gathering processes around children not in receipt of full-time education. So they had let us know this was happening. And they had also told us that the Education Psychology Service were aware of that part-time arrangement for this young person. In truth, they'd taken support and advice from the Education Psychology Service and from our Communication and Interaction Team Service around moving to part-time provision. And that is something that we would see as good practice. We always tell school leaders not to take decisions about part-time education on their own. There should always be health service guidance saying that's the right thing, or some other expert with them external to the school. And that had happened in this case, although this young lady was in receipt initially of only 2 hours education. Deciding what is reasonable education or suitable education for a young person with physical health needs or mental health needs is a judgment. There's kind of no fixed and easy way of doing that, but it's usually reached as a decision between the school, the external experts and the parents about what is reasonable. We do have a health-related education team that schools can apply to, who will support them around these decisions and who will put in interim education if the local authority needs to do so. That wasn't brought in this case. I think that the record keeping on this, decision making around this young person's suitable part-time education was held probably by the school, and what we couldn't do when we were feeding back to the Ombudsman was adequately evidence this. We had carried out our duties in relation to the local authority being satisfied. So I think the local authority had been satisfied. The Education Psychology Service were part of these decisions that were made, but at the moment of responding to the Ombudsman, we didn't have that evidence. So the learning from that has been very much that it isn't good enough for us to rely on the Academy Trust or the school to keep that record in the child's records, but as a local authority, our officers across the authority involved in these situations need to make sure that it's recorded in such a way that if we need to later to evidence how that decision was come to, we can do that.
Thank you. That seems to be a theme that's coming in, or a new theme that's coming in, evidence. And it doesn't mean to say things aren't being done. It just means to say we've got to write everything down or record everything, which is time consuming and not necessarily the best use of staff time. But there we are. Again, that's something that we can perhaps explore if and when we talk to the Ombudsman's representative. Councillor Creamer.
Yeah, agreeing with you entirely there, Chairman, and well done for actually spotting it and actually doing something about it. But the question is, does it have any financial implications, or employing the extra time and the extra effort? I mean, does it have any further implications as far as we're concerned in actually financing it and staffing the extra records, etc., etc.?
I don't think so, Councillor Creamer. I think if we amend our practice, we can do that without creating an additional cost.
Anything further on this one? Or are you happy to accept what you've heard? Thank you. The recommendations some time ago were moved and seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? No. Thank you. Right. Sorry.
Can I make a contribution?
Sorry, did I miss you? I didn't.
I'm just commenting on the remarks you've introduced to this meeting regarding meeting with the Ombudsman, if I may.
Yes.
I, you obviously have more experience of looking at these decisions than I have as a mere substitute. But I just wondered, this committee has been delegated authority by full council, and we're looking at situations that clearly are extremely stressful for complainants and indeed for members of our own staff. So we have, forgive the sporting analogy, an independent referee come in and give their opinion. And you this morning clearly are coming across as slightly frustrated that, you know, we seem to be getting a difficult end of the stick. So your suggestion is a meeting with the Ombudsman. I have the greatest respect for you, Councillor Owen, but I just wonder whether it would give the wrong impression if just yourself met with the Ombudsman, just to perhaps, I mean, let's face it, the public and the press are listening to this meeting. Are you looking to move the goalposts, if I may use that phrase? So, to be positive, I sense there is concern of what's come through in these reports. Would it be more helpful if more of the committee were involved in such a meeting, and more of a sort of an education to the committee? Because I think what we don't want to be seen as is just simply, you know, anti the Ombudsman. Clearly, I don't believe that anyone would approach these situations with a closed mind, and I don't want us to give the impression that because they just don't go our way that we're unhappy. You know, clearly there must be a balance somewhere, and maybe it will be helpful to have a meeting. But I just wonder, would it be helpful for more of the committee to meet with the individual?
Well, thank you for that, Councillor Perdue Horan. Using your sporting analogy, I'm seeking VAR with the Ombudsman to better understand where they are coming from, and I will be no doubt accompanied by the Vice Chairman, Councillor Lee, and by officers of the Council, and an appropriate report will be brought back to this committee for discussion. I wouldn't say that we are anti the Ombudsman, but I think we do need to put our point of view publicly, because some of these reports, if not all of them, are critical of the council. And that's fair enough. I've made it quite clear at the very beginning where we make a mistake, and mistakes do happen. We should hold our hands up and say, we've made a mistake. Let's get to the bottom of it. So I think I'm being as transparent as I possibly can be. But we don't even know that the meeting will take place yet, whether the Ombudsman's representative will want to meet with us. But it would be normal practice for Chairman and Vice Chairman, along with appropriate officers, to attend that meeting. So we have dealt with that particular item, but thank you for your... Can we move on then to page 67, which is the report on the statement of accounts, and where you're being asked to approve a recommendation that delegates signing off these accounts to the Section 151 officer and myself. I will move the recommendation.
Chairman, I second reserve my right
Thank
to
you.
speak.
We've got somebody from the... Yeah, we have. To tell us yet again why you're not able to complete our accounts, all to do with valuing roads, isn't it? Go for it then.
Thank you, Chair. So you may recall when we presented the audit plan to this committee back in the summertime, there was a sector-wide issue around the accounting for infrastructure assets, which are essentially highways, roads, bridges, street lighting, that kind of thing. There's been quite sort of lengthy bits of work done by SITFA and DeLuc trying to resolve the issue. There is no solution. So DeLuc are now going to issue a statutory override, which I believe is being laid before Parliament this very day. That should come into law by the end of December. So hopefully what that will do is allow both the council to just assume that the opening balance on infrastructure assets that have been brought into the 21-22 accounts is correct, ignoring the requirements in the SITFA code, and that will allow us to proceed with signing off the council's opinion, and the opinion upon the accounts without qualifying on the infrastructure assets. It will mean that the council has to do work going forward in terms of improving how it accounts for infrastructure assets, and I understand that SITFA will be issuing some new guidance around that to enable authorities like yourself to properly component account and depreciate properly infrastructure assets going forward. So there is still work to be done for the council going forward, but in terms of the opening balance, hopefully the statutory override will allow us to sign off without qualifying.
Are you able to share with us this morning any idea as to what this SITFA guidance will be? I mean, for example, this affects district councils as well. I was told at my district council that they've got to value their street furniture, their seats. How do you value depreciation on a park bench?
This is largely affecting upper tier authorities, counties and metropolitan councils, because they've obviously got quite material levels of infrastructure assets. Districts, generally speaking, don't. So most of our districts are not affected by this issue, but I appreciate you may have a district with lots of street furniture. But there isn't a need to, this is not about fair valuing a park bench or a road. The accounting requirements are a historical cost. So it is effectively cost, but it just needs to be depreciated properly and then de-recognised when it is replaced. So you don't need surveyors going out there revaluing these things, but you do need to account for them properly and depreciate them properly going forward. In terms of the SITFA guidance, what that will do is shed light on what the expected components are that they expect councils to have, and it'll also, I believe, issue some expected ranges for useful economic life for, say, a road or a street light or a park bench, which is based upon some civil engineering advice that they've received. So my understanding is that the SITFA guidance will give some sort of practical guidance around how councils can go about accounting for these assets going forward.
So we're going to send Nigel around valuing all our street lights, are we? Well, that's good. Councillor Creamer, then Councillor Payne.
Yeah, just a question. I don't know if you can answer it, to be quite honest, and that's it. The SITFA guidance, when it comes, will it actually put proper divisions between district councils, borough councils, and county councils? And I'm thinking, because you've actually mentioned lights, there are several footpaths within Gedling that the lighting still comes onto Gedling, for instance, and you can tell them at the moment because they haven't got LEDs. So there's a nice way. But actually, assets, the SITFA guidance, is it going to be good enough to actually split up that's district, that's county, or is it going to cause more confusion?
I don't think that will be the intention of that will be covered by the SITFA guidance. Obviously, I've not seen sight of it yet. I've not seen a draft of it, but I don't think it will actually cover off that particular issue.
Councillor Payne, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, apologies, Andrew, for slightly shooting the messenger here in my comments. This is not intended as a personal remark on you in any way. I do find it a bit remarkable that we've ended up in this situation as a local government sector. I mean, it's not it hasn't fallen from sort of planet Mars, has it, that local authorities have infrastructure and that it's quite complex and that county councils or a highway authority are responsible for roads. I mean, just that we've got ourselves into this situation where we now need an additional piece of legislation to sort this issue out, I think is remarkable. But notwithstanding a debate about that issue, there's a knock-on consequential reputational issue for local government, which is that the approval of our statement of accounts, one of the most important documents that a local authority can approve, have been delayed. And I think that, I've made this point time and time again. Councillor Owen is right. It doesn't just affect this authority, it affects district authorities, it's affected the fire authority. And in the end, whilst members of the public might opt to pore over the statement of accounts, they do need to know that they've got trust in their public bodies who are spending their money, that they're doing that in an appropriate fashion. And a delay in the approval of the statement of accounts, I think, is quite a serious damage to the reputation of public sector bodies. And I know that's not in your gift, but I just find it truly remarkable that we've ended up in this position where a number of authorities have had their statement of accounts delayed. And to that end, and again, this is no slur on you, Councillor, and I'm sure you're a perfectly able person to sign off the statement of accounts under delegation from this committee, I do have real nervousness about agreeing to a recommendation that delegates signing off the statement of accounts to you solely as the chairman. The whole point of this committee, and you've made it very clear, Mr. Chairman, from the start of our establishment, is that we're here to robustly hold to account whatever piece of work comes before us. And the statement of accounts is a really, really important document. And essentially what we're saying here is, well, because of some problems happening elsewhere nationally, we'll delegate the authority to Councillor Owen and just sign it off when he gets the report. He's probably got no option but to sign it off because it's a statutory requirement, and questions don't get asked then on the statement of accounts. We're not effectively, as elected members, cross-party, fulfilling our duties. So I'm very, very reluctant to support the recommendation. I think we're left with very little option, but for it coming back to a full committee here. And I understand then you get into issues around when the committee's held and further delay, etc. But I don't think it's satisfactory. It's not a slur on you, Andrew, at all, but this is the only appropriate point to raise that point. So I'm raising it here, Mr. Chairman.
No, you're spot on. I'm very unhappy, if not nervous, about having to take that responsibility upon myself with the Section 151 officer. What would be the situation if we were to say, let's bring it back to the next meeting of the Governance and Ethics Committee?
If I may, Chair, the issue is that the next committee is the 4th of January. It's unlikely that the audit, because the statutory override is probably going to be only at the end of January, therefore we've missed the publication date for the committee, which means that it will be delayed until the next one, which won't be until February. So, but to be assured, if I may, from a very good point made by Councillor Payne, the document of the draft accounts have already been published. They were published in July, and therefore there's an opportunity when the draft accounts was published for the committee to ask questions and to scrutinise. They are still there for councillors to raise questions and ask questions. So it's not like that you've missed an opportunity to raise or ask questions of the accounts that are there. When we published the final accounts with the opinion from the auditor, it's a public document. So again, it's still there for questions to be raised and asked and scrutinised. And you will also receive an audit report, which I think is the ISO 260 report. So there will still be the scrutiny document published by the external auditors on their review and understanding of the accounts, which gives you another opportunity when that comes in terms of asking the questions and scrutinising the final accounts. So it's not a case of you'll not see them or not have the ability to ask questions, if that can assure.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman, it does. I mean, the central point though here, Nigel, is that we're asking questions about something that hasn't yet been audited. That's the point I'm making. The audit hasn't been complete. We're in a cleft state, aren't we? It's a really difficult position that we find ourselves in, not through no fault of anybody's in this room. I just think it's really unsatisfactory, and we're not the only authority that's on the receiving end of it. And it puts Councillor Owen in a really difficult position, I think, because if there were issues, I suspect there aren't, because of your good officers and Keith and other people, and I'm sure that Grant Thornton have done a really good job. But if there were issues, it puts Councillor Owen in a really invidious position.
I'm going to have the police knocking at my door and things like that. Well, yeah, I can't disagree. I just blame the accountants if I do criticise and deal with it like that. But I hear what you say, but I think we've got to be pragmatic about this, and we need to get them signed off as soon as it becomes possible to do so. So I would, on this occasion, crave your indulgence and ask that we do get support for this. So, if there are no further comments, Councillor Butler.
Well, just with that point, I presume that when they are signed off, whenever that is, will be told? I assume the committee will be informed. Will it be? Could it be on whatever date that committee is, and when we're told this? Could it simply be if it's nothing else but a noting report saying yes, the accounts were signed off on whenever, and if there had been any queries or issues, they would be notified to us. I assume that would happen anyway.
Yeah.
Again, a very good point, Councillor Butler. We will make sure that because it is a public document, and when they're signed off, they'll go onto our website, that we will email colleagues in terms of that they've published, and also with the link to them, so that colleagues can actually see them. It will be, hopefully, I am anticipating an unqualified opinion as a consequence of the change to the infrastructure. Yeah.
Okay. Can we move to the vote then? The recommendation has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? No, that is unanimous. Thank you very much for your help. Internal audit progress, term 1 and term 3 plan. You've got the report set out in front of you. I move the recommendation on page 76.
Chairman, a second and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on this? Councillor Payne.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Page 82, which is, I think, Appendix 2 of the report, makes reference towards the tail end of the table, I presume in terms of forward programme for internal audit, about budget setting and MTFS. And it says, undertake a review of robustness and consistency of budget setting processes and assumptions. And penultimate point, use of agency staffing, undertake a review of the use of agency staffing contracts across the council and especially in high use areas. There's a H against both of them and it says priority level if risk assessed. I presume H means high. I just wonder why there's a high level of risk against both budget setting and MTFS in terms of that commentary and the use of agency staffing. And it'd just be helpful if we do think as a council we've got some concerns around use of agency staffing. We're a large organisation. I certainly, as a member of this committee, would quite like to hear a little bit more about that because that's the pressure on our budget. And I'm sure Nigel is perfectly able to answer why it might be just that they're having a routine internal appointment audit in terms of MTFS and budget setting processes given the financial challenges. But the commentary and the fact that it says H, if you were a layman and you were coming to this new without any additional commentary, you would think, why is there a high risk against these two areas?
It's priority level if you look at the top of the column.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add?
You're absolutely right, Chairman. In terms of it's just the way internal audit then define areas for how it goes into the audit plan in terms of its high, low, or medium. So it's because it's been a while since there've been those areas to review. So they've come from low into this year into the high category. It's just it hasn't been done for a while. So that's why it's just a 3-year cycle.
High priority rather than high risk, I think, is the point. Marge would like to say a few words on agency staff.
Agency spend. So we're actually doing a really, really detailed piece of work at the moment. Yeah. So we're going line by line through every vacancy, every post on the authorised establishment, every vacancy and every agency worker and looking at what they're being asked to do, what work are they doing, is it necessary, how long has it been going on for, how long is it going to continue. So we can look at the cost and check we're getting value for money and it's the most appropriate use. That piece of work's being led by the corporate leadership team. And as I say, we're going forensically through every single agency worker. So we can have a really clear look and understand our position and then make some decisions about what we do going forward. So that piece of work, it's not an audit, but it's a really detailed piece of work that's underway now. And what I would suggest would be at some point in time after we've made any changes from that, audit might want to have a look at that and say, okay, what's the impact of what we've done? So just to give you that assurance really that we're doing, I don't think you could do it any more detailed if I'm honest with you.
Okay. Right. The report has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? No, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. If we can move to page 83, item 8, the follow-up of internal audit recommendations. The 2 recommendations on page 89, which I move.
Chairman, I second reserve my right to
Thank
speak.
you. Any comments or questions on that report? No? In which case, can we move to the vote? All those in favour? Anyone against? No, that is unanimous. Item number 9 is the governance update, and we have recommendation, just one recommendation on page 102, which I move.
Chairman, I second.
Okay, any comments or questions? No, in which case can we move to the vote? All in favour? Anyone against? No, that is unanimous. The next item is the revised Officer Code of Conduct and Procedure for Officer Reporting of Interest, Gifts and Hospitality. I understand this has not been reviewed or updated for some considerable time. It is our role in this committee to review, update and hopefully approve and recommend to full council. So if it goes through today, I assume it will go to the next meeting of the full council. Again, the report has been circulated. There are 2 recommendations on page 110, which I will move.
Chairman, I second.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? No. All those in favour? Anyone against? No, that's unanimous. And the last item on the agenda is the work programme, which is set out in front of you as it is at the moment. Are you happy to accept that? Because I will move the recommendation on page 124.
Yeah, Chairman, I second it.
Any comments or questions? Nope. All those in favour of the work programme? Anyone against? That's unanimous. Thank you very much for your attendance, and I declare the meeting